We're taking you live now to Brisbane, where opposition leader Peter Dutton is detailing the cost of the coalition's nuclear scheme.
In particular, I want to say thank you very much to David Littleproud, who has done an enormous amount of work in relation to the regional aspect, particularly of this plan. I want to say thank you to Angus Taylor, who's spent a lot of time in energy policy and as a former minister knows the space very well and is one of the most capable minds in the country when it comes to the issue of energy, and also, of course, to Ted O'Brien, who has engaged with stakeholders around the country and has brought together our plan today. Over the course of this term, we've spoken to Australians about the safety of nuclear. Of course, the Prime Minister signed up to the nuclear submarines and therefore sent a very clear message to Australians that there are no safety concerns about the latest technology in relation to nuclear. We spoke about disposal, and the government signed up to disposing waste, including the end-of-life reactors, under the AUKUS submarine agreement. We spoke about the locations, and we identified 7 end-of-life coal-fired power stations across the country because we have existing poles and wires on those sites, which saves a dramatic amount of money, which is reflected in the work that we present to you today. We dealt with the sites, and it comes down to now the cost, and it comes down to the timelines. I'll come to the cost, obviously, in a second. In relation to the timelines, the AUKUS legislation that enables the nuclear reactor to be a part of our Defence Force and to be a key technology for us to defend ourselves, that has been facilitated through legislation which has passed through the Parliament already. Why has it passed through the Parliament already? It hasn't taken decades to do. It's taken both parties, specifically to the exclusion of the Greens, to get that legislation through Parliament. And we have a situation here where I think it'll be post-Anthony Albanese's leadership, which I don't think is too far away. And in that scenario, I do think there can be a bipartisan position in relation to the vision that we put to the Australian people today. This is a plan which will underpin the economic success of our country for the next century. This will make electricity reliable, it'll make it more consistent, it'll make it cheaper for Australians, and it will help us decarbonise as a trading economy as we must. And the fact is that we can deliver a plan which is going to keep the lights on, and we have a plan and a vision for our country which will help grow businesses, not close them down, as is currently happening under this government. I know that there are many Australians at the moment, in fact 560 a week, families who are going on to payment plans or experiencing hardship when it comes to paying electricity bills under the Albanese government. But the most tragic part is that it's going to get much worse if Mr Albanese is elected, particularly in a minority government situation. And what we've looked at is the experience of every developed country around the world, the energy mix that they're using. And if you look to jurisdictions, for example, like Ontario or in Tennessee, they are paying 18 cents a kilowatt hour for their power at the moment because they have renewables firmed up by nuclear. In South Australia at the moment, people are paying 56 cents a kilowatt hour, 3 times the rate. So is it any wonder that we've had a 3-fold increase in the number of manufacturing businesses which have closed in our country over the last 2.5 years? Is it any wonder that the cafe that I visited in Sydney yesterday and the IGA store have seen a doubling or a trebling of their electricity bills under this government? But it's going to get worse, and we've already seen the first signs of blackout under the Albanese government, and their zealot-like approach to a renewables-only policy is going to cause a lot of grief to our country in the near term and in the long term. So we deliver a plan today which will get the energy mix right, it will lower costs, it will keep the lights on, and it will set our country up for generations to come. So I'll ask my colleagues to say a few words, DLP, and then to Angus.
Well, thanks, Dutto. Can I say today shows that there's a better plan, a better way, a cheaper way and a more reliable way to provide power to the Australian people. But this report, I think Australians already knew because they've got the lived experience of paying higher electricity bills and being asked by state premiers to turn off their dishwashers. That is an embarrassment in a country as rich as Australia, that has sovereignty of all its resources. This is about legacy. This is about leaving a legacy for generations to come in making sure we have that reliable power. There is no country on the industrial scale of the size of Australia that has gone down an all renewables approach. And that's why we're saying let's draw on that, let's have a mix and make sure that regional Australia doesn't bear the brunt of our pathway to net zero emissions. We can do this and we should do it a uniquely Australian way. And that's why we should have a mix that regional Australia isn't littered with transmission lines, solar panels and wind turbines. We should have energy industry in regional Australia that provides jobs. Nearly 80% of those that work in current coal-fired power stations will be able to transition across. That gives them a future. That gives those regional communities a future. That's common sense. And that's why we made it very clear that we wanted to look at this as not just leaving the legacy of reliable, affordable power, but also giving a future to regional Australia. And while many in the cities and those teals want us to go down an accelerated path of renewables, just understand the burden you're asking us to bear. There is another way to achieve it. We're all wanting to achieve it. We're just saying this is a better way, a cheaper way, and a more reliable way to do that. That is the common sense that a coalition government will bring. I'm proud to be part of this team that's used that's drawn on the experience around the world. And in this country, what we need to do is change the culture of finding reasons why not to do things, but backing ourselves and getting on with the job and doing it. That's what a future coalition government will do. We're going to get on with the job and we're going to do this. We're going to do this and leave a legacy for our nation that ensures that we have the standing of living that we have today. That's the responsibility that Peter and I are bringing to this. I'm proud to be part of this, and this report today just reinforces that there is a better way. Thanks, Gus.
Thanks, David. Well, it's great to be here with my colleagues for this very important announcement, an announcement of a plan that is visionary, that's realisable, and most importantly, is affordable. A 44% reduction in the cost of energy for Australian consumers. That is what this plan is all about. Now, right now, Labor is taking us on a pathway to economic ruin. We've seen GDP per person going backwards for 7 quarters in a row, almost 2 years of household recession. We've seen our standard of living collapse in front of us. Unprecedented. We haven't seen this before. The worst of any of our peer countries. And Australians are paying a high price for it. Right at the heart of that is the complete failure of this government to deliver on their promises on energy. They promised $275, no sign of that. All we've seen on energy is higher prices and higher emissions at the same time. The exact opposite of what we need. This plan is about getting us back on track. It's about saying there is a more affordable way to achieve the outcomes that Australians want: lower emissions, affordable energy. And right at the heart of this is a recognition that by putting in place zero emissions nuclear power, we can reduce the cost of storage, of transmission, of capacity by a very significant number that can reduce the cost of energy bills to Australians. As I say, this is a visionary plan, it's a realisable plan, and most of all, it's an affordable plan, a 44% reduction in costs. And we are absolutely committed to doing what we have to do to make sure Australians don't pay more than they should for their energy. Ted.
Thank you very much, Peter, Angus and David. Energy is the economy, and Australia is at a fork in the road when it comes to our energy future. We continue down the path of Labor's renewables-only approach. We'll become poorer, weaker and more dependent as a nation. We adopt the Coalition's balanced energy mix and we become wealthy, strong and fiercely independent well into the future. We've already laid out a lot of our plan with respect to introducing zero emissions nuclear energy. Frontier Economics has now crunched the numbers, and they have shown that it is 44% cheaper to get to net zero through a balanced energy mix when you have nuclear in that mix. This has a direct impact on families and on businesses right across the country. We know that families are hurting right now. Every single week, since Labor came to office, 560 families have signed up to hardship arrangements with their energy retailer. They were promised a $275 reduction in household power bills, but families are paying up to $1,000 more than what Labor had promised them. Australians are hurting right now, and businesses are closing. Nearly 25,000 businesses have gone insolvent since Labor came to office. And a big part of that is the cost of energy, which is why our single priority here is all about getting costs down, making sure that as we go towards a net zero electricity grid, we do it in the way which is going to be the cheapest possible pathway. We've learnt the lessons from overseas. There's a reason why over 30 countries today use nuclear energy, and over another 50 are looking at introducing it for the very first time. That is because nuclear in the mix brings prices down. Only recently we had the United States Department of Energy, the DOE, issued their own analysis showing that if you compare a renewables-only pathway to a renewables plus nuclear pathway, the renewables and nuclear pathway is 37% cheaper. And so today we see published Frontier Economics report comparing Labor's renewables-only pathway to the Coalition's balanced energy mix. Its conclusion is that with a balanced energy mix under the Coalition, it'll be 44% cheaper. That's $263 billion less than what would otherwise have to be paid under Labor's plan. That's around $10 billion every single year. Our priority is to put the Australian people at the centre, and that means we have to drive costs down, and Frontier Economics has now done the work independently, and they have shown that with nuclear as part of a balanced energy mix, it will be 44% cheaper than Labor's renewables-only approach.
Ted, thank you. We'll take questions starting here, and we'll just work around one by one. So if you'd like to start off.
Yeah, this is switching gears from this topic.
Well, why don't we stick to this topic, and then we're happy to cover other issues. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Your nuclear plan has a small percentage of gas in the future energy mix than the government's. Does this plan actually move out fossil fuels earlier than you expected?
Well, what it says to Australians is that we have a plan which is a sensible mix of energy sources. We add nuclear into it. But what I'd say to every Australian today is that at the next election,